Hello, folks. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Hamline Athletics Q&A with Athletic Director Jason Verdugo. My name is Molly Glevy. I work in the Alumni Relations Office at Hamline, and I'm so pleased to have folks join us today for a conversation about athletics, both at Hamline and in the college landscape more generally. A few housekeeping items before I hand it off to my colleagues. You will be muted and your camera will be off for today's presentation. I feel a lot of us know these things by now, but good to remind you. If you have a question for Jason Verdugo, or actually our other attendees today, Aoife and Dan, you'll get to know them in a moment. If you have a question for any of them, please put that into your Q&A on your Zoom dashboard. If you have a question about the logistics or need any troubleshooting support, go ahead and use the chat icon and we will help troubleshoot as need be. And then of course, our standard Zoom caveat is that we're presenting from all sorts of different locations. So please be patient with us as you might hear dogs, cats, lawnmowers, etc. And before I hand it over to my colleague, Mario Hess-Winburn, Director of Annual Giving Programs, I want to mention at the top, I'll probably mention when we're done as well, that it is Homecoming and Alumni Week at Hamline. And this Saturday, we'd love to have PAA members join us on campus before the homecoming football game. Check our website. There will have a tent set up for PAA members and their guests, and gate passes and concessions and Hamline swag and all sorts of things. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mario Hess-Winburn. Mario, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mario Hess-Winburn. As Molly mentioned, I am the Director of Annual Giving Programs here at Hamline. I'd just like to take a moment to introduce you to our panelists for today. So first, I'd like to introduce Dan Ogiba, who is a graduate of the class of '99. He is the co-president of the Piper Athletic Association Board, a former HU football player. He is currently vice president real estate and construction, AM Retail Group, and lives in Lionel Lakes with wife Ashley and daughter Violet. Also on the call today, we have Aoife, who is class of 22 and is the current co-president of the Student Athlete Advisory Committee. She is a track athlete from North St. Paul, and she is a double major in legal and women's studies with a business minor. And then last but not least, we have Jason Verdugo. He is Hamline's Associate Vice President and Athletic Director. He first came to HU in 2001 as the head baseball coach, and is now doing lots of great things here at Hamline for our scholar athletes. And you'll get the opportunity to ask him any questions that you would like today. All right. And with that, I'm going to actually hand it over to Aoife, who is going to get us kicked off with our first question here. And as I mentioned, at any time, feel free to drop those questions into the Q&A. And we can't promise we'll get to all of them, but we'll try to get to as many as we can. All right, Aoife.
Sweet. Okay, to start things off, Jason, what are you most optimistic or excited about in this upcoming year?
We're back, right? I mean, the biggest thing is that in some cases we are, we're somewhat back to normal in that we have the opportunity to have student athletes participate in games, relatively normal. Obviously, there's a number of protocols that are still in place, and but with fans attending those games and interacting. So that's what I'm probably most excited about, the fact that we've started the fall up to this point and things are going well. Students are back on campus and in classrooms, and the excitement around campus, again, just the fact that there's people in and out of buildings, and student athletes are, engaging in kind of normal activity, if you will, is what I'm most excited about, just from a normalcy standpoint. And beyond that, just optimistic about us getting back and competing. We're off to a relatively good start in the fall competition. Men's and women's soccer are doing well in terms of competition, and men's soccer's had some tough ones. But women's soccer has a winning record. Football has a winning record. Volleyball, obviously, off to a great start at 11-4. So, yeah, optimistic about all that going into the remainder of the year.
Jason, that's fantastic, and it really is an exciting time. One of the questions that I had, just kind of to continue on something you had mentioned there, you had talked about getting some fans back in attendance at events, and for those of us that are excited to get back to campus or the other venues, are there any particular items we should be aware of, or places to gather information to how we can attend those events, or any protocols related to those?
Yeah, the only limitations really, is what we do in terms of internally indoors, which is, again, pretty consistent with what you see in a lot of places around the Twin Cities and beyond, is masking inside. So for us, our volleyball games, there's masking. The expectation that everybody will be masked, all the spectators, student athletes not so much, because our vaccination rates and the testing protocols that are in place via the MIAC and NCAA. So that is kind of the standard across our league in terms of inside. Outside, a little bit more quote unquote back to normal in terms of for homecoming. What we'll do is we'll have all the fans enter on the east side gate and just enter that way, limiting the space a little bit inside. But when they go inside to use the restroom if needed in that space, there'll be masking expected, just similar to what we have on campus and in the classrooms at this particular time. We're optimistic, I think, thinking about lifting that at some point. We want to be positive and optimistic. I don't know when, certainly, but that'll be a decision not only from an athletic standpoint, but just a campus-wide standpoint. And but as of now, things are going really well, and we're excited about that going forward.
Awesome. Okay, so where do you see success in the upcoming year?
Our whole department, really. I'll say that each and every program is different in terms of where their starting point or what their goals going into the year. And the focus, the baseline focus, and you've probably heard me say this multiple times, kind of three tenets that we look at for all of our programs, obviously for a variety of reasons. One, maintaining that they're a full roster. Obviously, any of our sports teams that have full rosters, if you will, there's such a competitive advantage to that. And, obviously for depth issues and all that going forward. And I think for a majority of our sports, they're all in really good places. Academically, the standard, we want to be above a 3.0 typically, because if you're that in each and every program, graduation rates and academic progress reporting is really good. And we've been really stellar, especially during the COVID, which I anticipated there might be some hiccups there, but actually we flourished in the last couple of years. I'm really proud of student athletes and their commitment in the classroom just overall. And, and then last but not least, depending on where their program's at, not only a winning record, but finishing in the top 4 or the top 6 to get an opportunity to compete in postseason play, which, again, every student athlete, that I hope that everybody gets the opportunity to experience postseason play, or the MIAC conference track meet, which you're familiar with. Any of those, or for lacrosse, it's a different conference, in gymnastics in the WIAC. So really optimistic about the year. Most proud of the fact that the coaches have handled kind of the difficulty of the last 19 months really well. And it's, as a result, a majority of the games that we've played or competed in have been really competitive. And I'm really proud of that. It seems like student athletes are really dialed in. Their fitness level is good. but hopefully we'll cross our fingers and that continues as we go forward.
That's fantastic, Jason. And one of the things you just had mentioned is talking about some of the playoffs and some of the conference, kind of the conference work. So it sounds like everything is sort of back with the pre-COVID plans for conference championships and things like that. And so I think that'd be the first question is if they are, and then the second is, do you see things, with some of the recent kind of realignment with some portions of the MIAC and some of the other conferences, do you see more of that in the future, or do you think things are kind of have shifted for what your expectations are at this point?
Well, it's a good question, Dan. I mean, if you would have told me that, again, just the realignment, thinking about when I was a student athlete, as a former Pac-10 student athlete, now it's a Pac-12. So obviously a long time ago, not to date myself. And then obviously now you see, if you keep up with athletics, just in general, you see some of the shift in the SEC and all the different dynamics related to the NCAA and name, image, and likeness, how that has influenced what goes on related to athletics, even at our level. And so I think the shift for us is, we lost a member, we've added a member in St. Scholastica, and I think they're situated to be very similar to what the rest of our conference is, which is great. They'll be competitive in all their sports, and I know that their president has a sincere interest to continue to make that a footprint for their campus and in our league. So, but as far as continued realignment, I look at it more globally from a Division 1, 2, and 3. I think every athletic director and colleague that I speak with, the number one priority is the health and well-being of the student athletes and their experience. And part of that is, again, the competitive balance. You want to have competitive balance across the board. I think there's some sports that are a little bit more difficult to do that. But again, when you look at it from Power 5 to mid-major Division 1s to Division 2 and Division 3, I think Division 3 at times has probably a little bit more of the difficulty in some cases because we're so big. We're over 400 schools, and that makes it a little bit difficult at times. But as you can see at the highest level, the Power 5s in Division 1, the landscape is certainly going to shift. The volume of money that's associated, resources that institutions are willing to input for their teams to be competitive. I'm not certain that that's going to change anytime soon. So a little long-winded, I apologize, but yeah, that's a lot to unwrap in a short period of time.
Sounds good. Okay, so how have you seen resiliency in the students in the past year?
A couple things, and the marker for me is what they've endured. Many of them that have taken advantage of coming back. I think at times when you face adversity, and as many of them have experienced over the last year and a half, is to, you're pushed to maybe divert your attention into doing other things, and really realizing in some cases, hey, I can maybe live without participating in athletics or doing some of those things. But that hasn't really changed. I mean, again, I go back. We've had a lot of student athletes take advantage of the NCAA opportunity to have an extra year. I know many of them that anticipate continuing to do that. But the resiliency, more than anything, the marker for me was what we accomplished in the classroom, because I think at times, they're used to maybe a traditional setting, going in a classroom, having that interaction. So when we're online, some of that had to shift in terms of their experience. And as a result, it didn't affect, our academic output. We had record years over the last 2 years in terms of academic performance, in terms of team GPAs. So to me, that has really showcased the resilience. And then to add on top of that, I would say the biggest thing is the attitude of the coaches during that time was, I think, really key and important. their jobs were extremely difficult, trying to communicate with student athletes virtually on a continual basis and check in on them. And then just how we trained student athletes for that whole year. You know, the protocols that Chris Hartman, who was excellent, the rest of our staff had to put in place to continue to make sure that the student athletes were in shape and good to go, not only for what we had the opportunity to compete last spring, but even going into this year. So, a lot to be proud of. Most definitely a lot to be proud of.
No, that's great, Jason. So we did get a question from one of the participants. I think is a fantastic one too. Is you talking about some of the resiliency in our students and what they've gone through. And the question came in specific to the baseball team, but also curious about other programs. Baseball typically had a spring trip that I think Arizona was planned. And there's been, some of the other teams have had the opportunity to participate in various parts, seasonally especially, and just was curious what the plans are for that for the rest of the upcoming academic year.
Yeah, that's a good question because I've met with each, I would say almost every team up to this point. I actually met with the softball team yesterday, and that just came to mind. I just didn't really even think about that, but thinking about baseball, softball, tennis, some of our teams that have lacrosse, some of our teams that have to, in order for them to fulfill their entirety of their season, just we try to go somewhere warm and into the south. As long as there's no travel restrictions, I think, our anticipation is that we will travel. Like I said, the biggest thing for us of, the 450 athletes, the vaccination rate is outstanding. And so for us is, feeling confident, assuming that the numbers nationally continue to stay in a pretty good position and nowhere there's no restrictions in any particular state. Like for I think softball intends to go to Orlando, and baseball intends to probably go to Arizona. And, again, whether it's track going on a training trip or what, if we can do it, we certainly want to do that. It's a big part of the experience. I mean, I would say more than anything, it's such a huge part of the experience in terms of their time as student athletes for those sports. And even for the sports that don't traditionally do that every year, some of them go every other year in terms of maybe try to just get the opportunity to do that and experience it. So we certainly most definitely want to get back to that.
I'm really hoping that our team has a chance to go to Arizona this year. I know we missed out from COVID. So another question from the chat. So at many small colleges, athletes make up a sizable proportion of the student body and therefore play an important role in the finances of the institution from tuition. So how does athletics work with the admissions or others at Hamline, and how does your work connect with the broader set of issues at Hamline and its financial perspective or picture?
Well, two things. Let me just say this. One, I'm grateful for the fact that, my title as Associate Vice President encompasses more than athletics in terms of my influence and opportunities to engage at the president staff level. So, there's an opportunity to understand that the footprint of athletics, not only what we do trying to be competitive and win games, but what we do, in terms of a broader sense for an institution and how critical we are, right? If our enrollment is X number, we have typically been 20 to 25% of the population. I anticipate that continues to grow in some cases, to 25, 30%. As a result of that, that's why continued support from the PAA, our alums, donors, all that have, been significant and influential in terms of being generous with their donations, help us run our programs in a manner which are so critical, right? To be competitive, whether that's just upgrades to facilities, just day-to-day operations as rising costs related to, something that people don't think about, just the cost of busing somebody, a team, what that costs and meals, et cetera. So, we're definitely cognizant of the finances associated with that. We're extremely tight with our admission staff, my Nia Zhongchen, who's our admissions director, Mike Tompos, who's VP for development, or advancement, I should say. And then most importantly, Dr. Miller. Obviously, athletics is important to her based on just her action and her influence at the NCAA level. But it's something that as we go into each and every year, us looking at budgetary implications, they're important because the finances of each institution, similar to us, I would say that I think more presidents are and admissions directors are soon realizing how critical athletics is. Because if there is a dip in say, enrollment, typically there's not a dip in the athletic enrollment aspect, right? That's why the rosters are absolutely critical. We certainly want to have, more football players. We certainly want to have some rosters that give us some competitive advantage, so we can develop student athletes as well and not have to play some of our first years early in their career, et cetera, et cetera. So that is absolutely critical for us to continue to evaluate.
Jason, you just talked a little bit about some of the continued and ongoing needs and ways that, the funds and the Piper Athletic Association can help support the athletic department and really the university as a whole. Are there any really large needs or some of the biggest areas of need that you see coming up in this year or the next year that Athletic Association members can know their support is going towards or can help build toward?
Yeah, not only from, day-to-day operations. I think one of the things that I've, in my 21 years at the institution, have noticed, people that have been generous enough to donate to athletics, they certainly want to know where that money's going in specifically, if you will, whether they're affinities to a particular sport or from a facility standpoint. So I think myself and Mario and the rest of us got to continue to do a good job of laying out what those things are. And some of them are, basic needs and amenities in terms of, as I talked about before, just the travel, the rising cost of travel for food and traveling. That's one. The second is the continual investment in facilities. There's two thoughts. One, that you want to have nice facilities to showcase so you can attract recruits, which is absolutely critical, as you know. And then, maintaining and upgrading as you go forward. So that's reconfiguring locker rooms to accommodate the rosters or how that coach wants to run a program. So locker rooms are going to be key for us to do and to evaluate. We've done a few, but we need to continue to do that. And some of that is just, new carpet, new lockers. Before there were big bulky lockers. Now they've gone to a trend of a little bit smaller lockers. So doing that, continue to look at our facilities, whether it's on campus costs, the tennis courts, which we need to redo, the pool, Patterson Field, and adding bleachers for soccer and softball, a cage for softball, and then continually upgrade space in Hutton that we can. So the endless list of capital projects. Let me just say that I don't want, and they just never, they're never going to end, whether it's here or anywhere else. I talk to my colleagues and they're all in similar positions because there's a life cycle to everything. The building I currently sit in, when I first arrived in Walker, as you know, Dan, it was a brand new, relatively brand new facility. And the weight room at that particular time, with the number of student athletes we had, was sufficient, and compared to what it used to be in terms of the Hutton hallway hallway that people talk about. But now it's, I come in the morning, it might be six in the morning, and we're training 3 or 4 different teams, and at a time. And Chris Hartman, who does an exceptional job of organizing that, he has to be really precise in terms of utilizing that space to have over 100 student athletes at 6 a.m. between 3 or 4 different teams, coordinate that. And people say, well, why do we're lifting at 6 because we're trying to avoid class schedule conflicts. So, that to me is the creativity of us. We've done an excellent job over the last several years of being mindful of finances. Beth Rittler, who's our associate athletic director and business operations, has done does a great job of extending dollars, if you will. So again, long-winded, I apologize for that, but yeah, a lot to unwrap there.
Yeah, no worries. So I have another question from the chat. This is a more fun one. So what is one of your most memorable moments from your time at Hamline? I'm sure you have many, but what's one that comes to mind?
Quite a few. Time to reflect during COVID certainly is. There's been a lot of important people in my life. Obviously, my family, my son. He grew up here. The first time I walked, when I arrived on campus, I would stay in the apartments the first time for the first couple of weeks, walking across campus for the first time. Really, this is my outside of playing professionally and working as a substitute teacher prior to taking this job. It was kind of my first quote unquote real job, if you will. And I was 25 at the time. So really that was a fond memory. Relationships with coaches and student athletes. And then I'd be remiss as just unique experiences that haven't happened in the history of the institution. So the Final Four for women's hockey, the national championship game for women's hockey, individual national champions that I got an opportunity to experience. I think we had 2 in gymnastics, 1 in track. As a coach, the guys would probably kill me if I didn't mention our baseball championship and playoff run and get an opportunity to play in the NCAA tournament. But then seeing our other teams, whether it's, softball playing in a championship multiple times, or, basketball team making the playoffs, or men's hockey making the playoffs, winning a playoff title. Those are memories that stand out. But beyond that, it's even the emails too, after the fact, that I get from student athletes via LinkedIn or what have you, that are appreciative, or my calls to former student athletes and players that I have interaction with. There's no greater joy, because when you're going through those particular moments, the intensity of that, you don't have really that time to reflect. And then when you get those calls or emails 5 years after or 10 years after, you realize what an impact you made on those particular students and student athletes and relationships. So a lot of memories, a lot of great memories here. And I'm grateful for this institution in so many ways. So yeah, it's been fantastic.
Jason, so one of the things that, and I think one of the unique and things you've been able to accomplish here was some really cool partnerships with some venues downtown St. Paul that have sort of extended the campus beyond our Snelling Avenue location into some really cool venues with some great partners. I don't know if you could just speak to a little bit to how some of those are going and how you can kind of utilize those to help university and recruiting scholar athletes and more broadly, just I think general students.
Yeah, those 2 relationships again started well before the completion of the project, and the hockey one, is probably the most bizarre, because I remember standing on the rooftop with nothing when it was just a parking structure, and to envision that what it has become. And then to see the stands, and then again, not only have a good team, but then to see the stands full, and then to see student athletes have the ability to play in that space and have their own locker rooms and fans come and all that. It's been fantastic. The staff there at the rink and the Wild have been outstanding. They've been great partners. Can't say enough. And they take on the burden of the day-to-day operations, which again makes it realistic and feasible for us in terms of being a little bit landlocked, and not only that, the expense that it's associated with that. Baseball, similar, there's been a little bit of a shift related to that, just because now their season is a little bit longer, because now they're a AAA affiliate, but their ownership group and their GM and those relationships, they've been outstanding, continue to grow and give us an opportunity to participate in first-class facilities. And then back to your original point in terms of the needs, when I think of that, we want to mimic that for every student athlete, so that's why having, people invest in our student athletes in ways of that experience on facility needs that we may need, or just upgrades to the current facilities that we have are so critical, for us to continue to do that. Because again, as you know, whether it's Walker, the Class Center, Anderson building, any of the things that we've been fortunate enough to have in my 21 years to see the footprint of this campus change dramatically. When you just think about those particular buildings and facilities, it took special families and people to be generous on their behalf, and a number of people to kind of piggyback on that. So, that to me is so critical for us to continue to think about that as we go forward.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously COVID-19 has probably had a big impact in recent years with us. But can you speak to how HU athletic programs and or at the athletic department in general are investing and giving back to the Hamline community as well as surrounding areas?
Yeah, I mean, let me, as we mentioned COVID, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, Tara Dooley and the rest of her staff, our athletic training staff. They've been remarkable. At times they've kind of, they've had to deliver the bad news and contact trace and some of those things that are really difficult, and that they've handled it exceptionally. Our partnership with Twin Cities Orthopedic has been outstanding. That's another partnership, Dan, when you talk about relationships. They support and provide all of our athletic training staff and team doctors, et cetera. So that in itself, let me just say, I can't say enough about the hard work, dedication, the staff, for them to be a unit of 4 and to juggle 20 varsity sports and different seasons in the overlap. We have to give them a shout out quite a bit because they've been outstanding. As far as the impact to the community, like I said, I think for us, continue to be good stewards in the community, continue to be cognizant of the challenges that we're facing in terms of COVID-19, and make sure that, we do the very best that we can to continue to be safe with our protocols, which I think we've done a great job on this campus from top to bottom. A lot to be proud of there. So.
Jason, you just talked about some of the team doctors training things that have gone on. Another thing that those of us that participate in athletics in a different era where the sports were very siloed from one another. I know you've done a number of things. You talked a little bit about the morning training sessions. I know you've done some things in partnership on some gear and some things to create some consistency across all sports, and really some unification from all of the different things. Can you talk a little bit about some of those things that you've done and to really bring a cohesive athletic department beyond just a collection of sports teams?
Yeah, there's a couple different things, I'll reference. One, let me reference SAC. The next thing that we kind of did, or I did, in terms of, I have all of our sports reporting to kind of an assistant athletic director, and some of that was intentional. Some of that is, men's and women's tennis, men's and women's swimming report to Beth Rittler. She's a former swimmer. She knows it well. She understands. Her son was a student athlete, or was a tennis athlete in high school. So she understands and very passionate about that. And then direct contact and so on and so forth with, Chris Hartman, Alex Folke, Emily Kripe, our senior women's administrator. So let me just start there in terms of the attention administratively. It doesn't mean that I'm far removed from that, because I feel like I'm dialed into all that's going on, but they're able to echo the consistency of what the expectations is across the board in terms of what we want all of our student athletes to experience. And then beyond that is, something that I've been really passionate about, that, again, this goes back several years when we started SAC and the structure that it is. And obviously Aoife and Avery can talk a little bit about that. I'll let Aoife talk about that as well in terms of the impact and how important that is. But, the legacy of SAC and the Evans family contributing to that legacy, is key, because in order for all of us to continue to be competitive, we all want to have a lot of consistency across the board, and it's got to be important for a student athlete in another sport to want another student athlete to be successful in their sport. It just helps. It helps the vibe in the building. It helps the vibe in terms of work ethic, and then in some cases there's kind of the shared process, right? That when you look at student athlete from another sport that are working out at 6 a.m. or late in the evening after classes, that's similar to you, like that, I'm not in this by myself. There's something to be said for, like, they know it's a grind, and they know that they can lean on student athletes outside their sport as well, not only in their sport. So to me, that's really, really important. The branding aspect is we try to stay consistent and just utilize the HU. I don't try to identify as many programs, if you will. We want to just say, we're Hamline University Athletics, and kind of the one team aspect. And I feel like we're closer to that more now than ever before. So.
Yeah, for sure. I think SAC plays a big role too in just keeping athletes connected with each other and with campus as well, which is just such a huge thing. We try to keep that across the board, just very connected. So I guess that kind of ties into this next question, and how D3 athletes or just Hamline athletes in general are supported academically, socially, holistically, et cetera.
Well, let me just say this, our campus has a lot of services, right? And student athletes that, want to engage in those, there's opportunities to do that. And I think our coaches, obviously, of what we've gone through and what we've seen, nationally over the last, several years and beyond, is to be more socially aware and cognizant about what's going on. Having a diverse population of student athletes in a number of ways, intersectionality related to the diversity is actually key as well, is to have, some individual thought and dialogue. And to me, that's where the growth is going to be. As I met with every team, one of the things I had talked about, just their tie to their parents and moving on or away from that, kind of, for lack of a better term, cutting the cord, is if we have student athletes that leave Hamline here, having been with our programs for 4 years, and not be cognizant of the world, so to speak, and what's going on, and be better and more informed, socially, educationally, individually, in terms of being able to have constructive dialogue and respectful dialogue across platforms. We haven't done a good enough job. We're not always going to hit it a home run with each individual, but I know our coaches are passionate and care about that. It's not just a kind of wordplay, if you will, to say we want to develop student athletes and have them prepared for the next phase of their life, which is key. Because the challenges in life are going to be much more difficult than what they face as a student athlete in some cases, right? The workout in the morning is a lot easier than when you're dealing with realistic life situations that, again, we've all faced. So.
Thanks, Jason. As we're working to wrap up here, we had one more question, kind of building. Again, we talked a little about conference structure earlier, and just wanted a question came in about the MIAC structure, and that just confirming that that's Hamline still conference, and if there's any conference communication or specific MIAC related updates that are out there.
Let me just say this, and our conference commissioner, Dan McCain, and his assistant, BJ, they're as good as there is in our business. I've had the opportunity just working on national committee work, and what I do and hearing other colleagues, we're lucky. They've withstood a lot of stuff in terms of the conference realignment and the shift in membership to divisions in football, to all the different things. And not only that, COVID protocols and to having 13 member institutions and all the different personalities associated with that in each of our campuses and our priorities. He's as good as there is. They are as good as there is. They've done an outstanding job. Let me say that. As a result of that leadership, the presidents, in our conference, the MIAC are another level. They're very cognizant of how important athletics is to the brand of the MIAC and their institution. And we're as strong as ever and really proud of that. My hope is that at some point that we have enough conference affiliation in lacrosse that we can add lacrosse as an MIAC sport. Right now, it's an independent. Coincidentally, the commissioner of that league is an MIAC athletic director, which is fantastic. And then our gymnastics is in the WIAC, and we have great relationships with those partners there. So, I don't anticipate that changing anytime soon. And the strength of our conference continues and remains as strong, if not stronger than ever.
Great, thanks, Jason. So as we're wrapping things up here, just wanted to see if you had any kind of final words or things to send out to the rest of the group here, or any other kind of final messages.
I just want to thank everybody, from our alums to parents, families, student athletes, former student athletes. Let me just say this. We all want to have championship teams and we all want to have a lot of success. I can tell you that, we want those same things too. And the hard work and dedication that our coaches, are putting forth is a lot to be proud of. The games obviously, are what they are at times, but the process and what we have in place, I'm really proud of all the work, but it's a byproduct of a number of people that contributed to that, even, like yourself, Dan, many of that give time and energy to continue supporting our current student athletes and our institution. So I'm just really grateful. The time and celebration with homecoming week is always exciting because it gives you an opportunity to reflect on all that we've accomplished and all that we should be proud of, and I'm excited for that. And to Mario and Molly, who are on, they're key contributors to our athletic success as well, even though they're not directly tied to athletic department per se. But again, it's a unified effort. We're really grateful for all the hard work that people put in. Can't say that enough. And and the student athletes, last but not least, the student athletes are awesome. We got some really good ones. Some really good ones here. Some great young men and women who represent and care about our institution greatly, and it shows by how they compete in their sports on behalf of the institution. So thank you to everybody.
Well, with that, I think we can say thank you to Jason and Dan and Aoife. Thank you so much. Great job, you guys. That was really fun. I appreciate it so much. Just to echo what Jason said about our student athletes, I have to give Aoife another shout out. She and Lindsay Bernardi are our two alumni relations student workers. They're basically making homecoming and alumni week go right now. So I can attest that our student athletes are just remarkable.